now 20 past 1, so I think we are ready to start. Since this is the first session after lunch, I hope I'm able to keep you all awake after hopefully a good lunch. The topic will be about Exchange Online. I don't know, just a brief question. How many of you already running Exchange Online Protection? There's a few, yeah. Any of you planning to go towards Exchange Online Protection? Good number of hands. Okay, briefly about me. My name is Peter Schmidt. I'm an infrastructure architect at EG in Denmark, where I work in our infrastructure department. My main focus is Exchange, Office 365, and a bit of Link. So that's mainly what I've been doing the past 7-8 years. Exchange I've been working with since version 5 or something like that. I'm a certified master on Exchange, when Microsoft had that program. I'm an MVP on Exchange. Besides that, I'm active in a lot of the Microsoft communities. I have my own blog where I do a bit of blogging with Twitter, so you should be able to connect with me there. And besides that, I co-founded one of the first unified communication user groups in Denmark called Collabora. But that was briefly about me. Onto the agenda. First, I'm going to look a bit at what EOP, Exchange Online Protection, actually is and how it works. And then I'll demo some on how you actually get it deployed and set it up. I hope you have a lot of questions for this session. And I hope you can write down the questions and we can take it in the end. There should be room for questions in the end. So, because I have quite a tight schedule that I really want to show you within the 60 minutes I have. First off, if we take a brief look at what Exchange Online Protection actually is, it's a feature set of Office 365 nowadays. It actually comes from those of you who might have known the Forefront Online Protection, but nowadays it's more integrated part of the Exchange in Office 365. What it can do for us is primarily help us stop virus and malware from getting into our organization. And Microsoft is using multiple scan engines, either on the malware side or on the antivirus side, to help you, protecting you against this. There are also some of the features known from Exchange 2013, which can help you protect your sensitive data in your organization, like the data loss prevention features, the DLP features, but there are also features where you can set up policies that in the end help you protect your data so you don't have information slipping out of mail, like with credit card information, social security IDs and stuff like that. As mentioned before, it's tightly integrated into Office 365, so it's the same portal we enter, and depending on what you have licensed, you have access to Exchange Online Protection and maybe some of the other features in Office 365. If we look a bit at the service level agreements, which is probably important to most of us, Microsoft has made some service description papers describing exactly what you get from the services in Office 365. And here are a few bullets from the service description paper on Exchange Online Protection. They guarantee you 5 nines in uptime, and that's a lot of it mainly because they have highly available and redundant systems with data center places all over the world. In Europe, we have data centers in Ireland and in Amsterdam. And there is support for you as well. The primary support is to the web portal in Office 365, but there are also a phone number you can call depending on the license you have. Otherwise, you can hook up with partners who do Office 365 and they can certainly help you get on the way. In case your on-prem system are down, EUP will queue your mail for 2 days. So that's also additional security for you so you're sure that your mail is not getting bounced back to whoever sent to you. If we start to look at the architecture behind this, well, actually, EUP is a cloud service like any other cloud service scanning your mail that gets into your on-prem environment. So you can consider EUP as something you put in between whoever communicates with you on mail. So all mail that gets to you or is directed to your environment is scanned by EUP on the way in, and the recommendation is also to use it on all mail you send out of your organization. EUP can be licensed in different ways. Some of you might just sign up on the portal and purchasing the EUP licenses you need. Or some of you might be able to get it as part of a volume agreement. I know for a lot of my customers in Denmark, they actually already have the Exchange Online Protection because it's part of their enterprise agreement. So in the end, you could probably also already have the license for this, and instead of using other cloud service providers for scanning your mail, you could probably save some money and go using EUP instead. EUP works with any mail platform, so actually you don't have to run Exchange on your on-prem environment. When we look at the deployment scenarios of EUP, we can use it for on-prem Exchange, but actually everyone already running in Office 365 is actually still already using the features of Exchange Online Protection. And starting off with EUP, it might even be an easy transition going forward if you in the future plan to use other Office 365 service, maybe a full Exchange Online or a hybrid of Exchange or something like that. If we start to look at the architecture behind the scanning in EUP, the first step that a mail gets to when it's routed to your domain and it hits the EUP, it's then hitting the connection point where the EUP starts to filter based on the source it comes from. What reputation does the source has? Is it part of any blacklist or anything? At that point, it will be rejected. Next step will be the virus scanning. It will be virus scanning as we know it. If there are any viruses, they will be stripped off and the mail will continue. Next step in this flow of mail will be any policies that we enforce. That could be certain transport rules that we want to set on the mail that goes into our organization. It could also be the step where we might want to enforce any of the DLP rules or anything like that. Our own allow block lists, maybe. The last step is the spam detection. Based on certain criteria within the scan engines available for Microsoft, your scam gets a certain rating, and depending on that rating, it gets quarantined or delivered to you. If it gets quarantined, the users can access their own quarantine themselves. I'll get further into that later. Otherwise, if it continues, we can deliver the mail safely into our corporate network. Just a brief heads up. When mails has been delivered to our corporate network, of course there can be some false positives in there. And we as the end user or the admin can report that back to Microsoft. That can then use those mails that they get back to reevaluate their scan engines and even optimize them further. When we use EUP as the outbound filtering system, we send the mail out from our corporate network. It hits the EUP. It first gets scanned for virus. If any virus, it at that point will be deleted from the mail. Next step will be any of the DLP policies we might set on the system. The last step will be spam. So we actually scan for spam on the way out as well. And that's because Microsoft is using different mail pools when they send mails out of Exchange Online Protection. So if we have a low score on spam, it will be considered safe to send this. And it will go out to the normal outbound pool. If it's considered something that looks like bulk mail, it will go out through a bulk mail pool. And we could also that the mail even was marked as something that was a high-risk mail, and then Microsoft will route that mail out of the system to a high-risk pool. And then mails going out of the high-risk pool will automatically be transferred back to Microsoft, so the spam analysts can analyze what's going out of the system. One of the reasons they are using these different pools is to secure mail delivery. There could be something that makes mails sent out so that they get on a block list of some kind. So instead of getting all mails sent out from EUP on a blacklist, well, there potentially would be the one in the high-risk pool that has the highest potential of getting on some blacklist somewhere. And of course, Microsoft is working towards that it's not happening, and in case something is ending up on the blacklist, they're investigating to make sure it's getting removed or whatever, or making sure that whatever got on the blacklist is not sent through the system in the future. But it's a security for you when using this service. Instead of you just sending mail out, maybe some bulk mail or something, and your own system gets on a blacklist. You probably know how hard it is to get off those blacklists again, and how long time it actually takes. So that's definitely something that's great about EUP. So you don't have to manage all that yourself. If we look a bit on the anti-spam side, of course, Microsoft is using these multiple engines to detect the spam that comes into the system. And all of you probably already know there's a ton of different kinds of spam that gets into our systems nowadays. We have everything from phishing campaigns to something that looks like bulk mail that might be potential spam. We have backscatter where maybe your company addresses has been spoofed, and then you get all the NDRs back. That could potentially be a lot of mail getting back. Things like this is able to be scanned and filtered by EUP, so it doesn't hit your company's Exchange servers or mail servers, but it's actually filtered off in the EUP from the beginning. To have a look at the multi-layered anti-spam engines in EUP. It's a bit like shown in one of the past slides, where we have the different levels that the mails is routed through. When we look at the first ones with the connection, this is actually the point where we look at the sources that mails come from. And actually 80% of all mails is actually filtered off here, if it's potential spam. The next step will be all the recipient reputations. So based on different reputation lists, 15% of all spam will be filtered off in this step. And the last step is the hardest part to detect. It could be any potential image spam, or where spam is probably more covered up within the mail, but this is where the last 5% will be detected and filtered off. Just briefly to cover these steps. Of course, you have the possibility of editing or some of these settings yourself. You could create your own allow or block lists that might suit your company. You can do that in the portal. I'll show you where that's located later on. You can edit some of the settings on the spam. And then we have the actions where we can decide what we want to do with things that are marked as spam. Do we want to delete mails? Do we want to quarantine them? Do we want to maybe even send them into our system and mark them with certain things in the X header of the mail? We can control that ourselves, and we do that in the portal. One of the ways where we can go in and tweak the spam settings could also be that if we get a lot of mails from certain languages or certain regions in the world that always are spam to our organization, you can go in and filter that based on language settings. Say everything from maybe Africa, or all mails coming from Afghanistan will automatically be filtered off because you have no business working with them, and you may be getting loaded a lot with spam mails coming from that region or in that language. That's just one way of tweaking the spam engines. So what about junk mail management? Well, potentially all junk mail is quarantined, or actually you have to go in and set up that it will be quarantined for the end user. You could also go in and set it up so that everything goes to the junk mail folder that the users already know on the system. In that case, the users can also use the safe list and allow list on the mails that they get in, and that will, if the end user automatically go in and list the mail as spam, or block that potential sender of the mail, that information will be replicated to Exchange Online Protection if you are using DiaSync or the new Azure AD Sync. The end users can access the quarantine area, which is web-based, where they are able to release the mails that have been caught in the system. But you're also able to set up a report for the end users. In that case, the quarantine access can be a bit more transparent to the users, and in case some of the mails that goes to the end user is caught as spam, they will get a report the next day telling them which mails has ended up in the spam quarantine. And from that mail, they can automatically release it from the quarantine area instead of logging on to some web page. They also have access to the web page, but the mail might be an easier way of doing it. So what about false positives and false negatives? Well, we have the possibility of rolling out add-in for Outlook, where the users are able to report back. And it's not back to us as the admin, but it's back to Microsoft, helping Microsoft optimize the spam engines. We can also send back to certain mail addresses telling Microsoft that we received a lot of mail that wasn't caught in the system and is spam to us. And that way the spam analysts from Microsoft can go in and evaluate this and optimize the systems even further. So if we look at deployment of EUP, we have a few different scenarios. We can implement this EUP as a standalone, where we use it as a pure cloud service. We have all our mailboxes located on-prem, and the licenses can be purchased maybe in the portal or as part of any existing license agreement. We can use it where we end up as a hosted using Exchange Online for hosting our mailboxes, or we can use it in a hybrid scenario. What's important when you start doing the deployment of this is that you go through a certain number of steps. We have some connectors that we need to create out in the portal to make sure we have some mail flow. You have to go in and add and validate all your mail domains to make sure that you actually own these domains and can use them in the portal to receive mail on. After that, we start tweaking the settings. Often it's not just the default settings we want to run with, but there might be something we want to tweak from the beginning. Otherwise, evaluate as you go on and see if it fits your organization. And then we would be ready to enable Mailflow and start looking at how things go. The first thing you need to do is go into Office 365 and register or claim the tenant, set it up, and get the licenses you need to run Exchange Online Protection. You can either do that, maybe activating the license you maybe already purchased, but otherwise you can start off with a trial if you just want to see if this service is something for you. And then you need, of course, the information about your on-prem environment, which IPs are sending to the EUP, which IPs should EUP send to. Of course, it's often the same destination as your MX record today, if you handle everything on-prem yourself. And maybe there could be something with some TLS communication that you might need to be aware of in setting this up. You could potentially implement directory sync as well. In that case, we're syncing all our mail-enabled users object to Office 365, and that gives us some extra features in Exchange Online Protection when we want to detect and make sure that the users are actually known on the system. I'll go briefly through this since I'm demoing a lot of this in a short while. But basically what we do is when we have our on-prem mail server and we have the new EUP tenant set up, we want to set up some connectors, and these connectors will be set up in the EUP. What's important to note about the connectors in EUP is that it looks a lot like Exchange 2013. We have inbound connector and we have outbound connector. The inbound connector is the one that we use when we get mail from the on-prem environment. And the outbound connector in EUP is the one that delivers mail from EUP to our on-prem environment. So that's just something you need to be aware of when setting this up, because it could be confusing that we have an inbound and outbound. Actually, everything handles connections to our on-prem environment and not anything outside or on the internet. But potentially we could have the need for more connectors in this setup. We could have a partner where we want to set up additional connectors to. That will also be done under the connection settings in EUP, and we can set that up. That's often if you have a partner where you want to make sure that all communication that goes to that partner is secure in transit. If we had a look at the different TLS scenarios, the way it works in Office 365 is that we have, or prior to Exchange Online Protection, we had certain common names on our certificates that matches the organizations that we communicated with. With Exchange Online Protection in between, that common name on the certificate changes. So you have to update the configuration on the on-prem environments in both ends for this to work as well. If we look at the connectors in Exchange Online Protection, and you have maybe multiple sites that need to communicate with your online tenant or the Exchange Online Protection tenant, you set up different outbound connectors based on where EUP will deliver the mail to of your branch offices or your on-prem servers. When mail goes the other way around, you can use one inbound connector in the EUP, and within the EUP we set up which IP addresses that our mail comes from. As stated earlier, we can go in and we can set up different policies in the system. Something that keeps enhancing in Office 365 are all the security features. We have the possibility of doing a bit of message encryption. We have the possibility of setting up some SMIME. And we also have the possibility of working with information rights management and setting that up so it works with all our mail flow. I only have 60 minutes now, so I'll not go in further into these steps, but if this is something for your organization, there's plenty of documentation on TechNet that dives further into this, and maybe, I know Magnus is doing a session tomorrow on some of the security features in Office 365. He might dive further into some of these. One of the interesting security features of Exchange Online Protection would be a new feature that came in the fall or before Christmas last year. Is the directory edge blocking feature. This is the one where we use Exchange Online Protection to discard all mail addresses not known by the system. So instead of mail hitting our on-prem servers with a lot of email addresses that might not exist on our system, we can discard all those mails in Exchange Online Protection. And the requirements for this is that we run a dersync so Exchange Online Protection knows which mail-enabled objects that we have on-prem. Okay, I have prepared a demo here. Let's have a look. So what I'll try and go through is basically what needed to get started with Exchange Online Protection. A few of you already running Exchange Online Protection might probably already seen these steps, but to begin with, it's just to show you how easy it actually is to get started on using EUP and doing some testing, seeing if it fits your organization. What I've done on the pre-staging part for this demo is I've claimed a tenant, set it up. This one is running a trial account for Exchange Online Protection. Besides that, it's more or less out of the box. I've pre-staged one of the domains, the litware.dk, so that's ready to use for mail flow. The only reason why I kind of pre-staged that already is the domain validation process can take a bit of time, so instead of waiting that here and maybe risking that it's not getting validated, I did that beforehand. But what happens is that you log into a portal that will resemble what you see if you're running Office 365 or if you've seen Office 365 services. And of course, depending on the services or the licenses available in the system, you get access to certain services. So what I've got here down is the online protection part. So I'll go into that part. Those of you who knows Exchange 2013, this might seem a bit familiar. See if the screen gets ready. But basically, what you get to get started, to get started on this is get your domains validated. If you want to start off with testing some of the domains, find a domain in your organization that's not used much, or maybe use a subdomain for testing on this. Put that in on the validation, on the domain settings, and validate that domain for mail usage before you start using your primary SMTP domains for this. So what we have here is some different features. What's most important here to get started on this part is our connectors part. We want to set this up so we can communicate with our on-prem Exchange server. We go in here. We can confirm in here that we have an accepted domain for the Litware. on the connectors, we have none set up at the moment. So I want to set up an inbound connector here. Just have a screen flickering down here, so. Okay, first thing you want to give this connector a name, because as stated in the slides, you can set up multiple connectors. Of course, you need the connectors to connect to your on-prem, but as mentioned earlier, you could also have different connectors to some of your partners or something else maybe. This would be the inbound connector, which will be here. Let's see. From on-prem to EUP. So we'll set it up to communicate with on-premise servers. You can put in a description here if you like. Would probably make sense if you have a lot of connectors, even though for just documentation purposes, it's always nice to have some comments on whatever is being configured on the system. I'll leave this as opportunistic TLS. Depending on your requirements, you can go in and force TLS on this, but you should be aware of if you're forcing TLS and for some reason the TLS is broken, there's no communication between EUP and your on-premise systems. The certificate part is used if you want to force any of the TLS communication. So basically we go in here and tell the system that, well, anything that goes from our on-prem environment delivered to the EUP service, it will handle. So who is delivering or communicating with this connector? Here I want to put in the IP address of my on-prem mail server, and that would be the public IP, of course. It could be that you have more IPs that you needed to put in here, and as stated in one of the previous slides, even though if you had multiple branch offices around the world, you can put in the different IPs from each of them in here and still having just one inbound connector. So now our inbound connector is set and the EUP is actually ready to receive mail from our on-prem environment. Now we want EUP to be able to deliver mail to our on-prem environment as well. This is still an on-prem we want to communicate with. We're still using opportunistic TLS on this part. You can set it up to use some kind of Emacs record if you want to, and then it'll look up where to deliver the mail. But in this case, it would make most sense that we put in the IP addresses again for our on-prem environment to make sure we actually get mails delivered. And again, the IP of my Exchange server. So what recipient domains will be routed with this connector? And in here I'll go in and I've already set up the domain, in this case litware.dk. So this is the domain that will be routed with this connector. So as you see, you could potentially have multiple outbound connectors based on how your criteria are for mail routing and depending on the different domains you have. And you can create multiple outbound connectors if needed and set them up for different delivery depending on the recipient domains you have in your organization. So that was the connectors. In case I wanted to use the directory blocking feature, which I mentioned earlier, so we in the EUP are able to reject any mail that is mail addresses which is not present on our system. We'll do that in here on the domains we have. Right now, the Litware DK is set to an internal relay. This means that all mail that gets to the system is, of course, going through all the scan engines that Microsoft has. And that will definitely catch most of the spam and everything that goes through it. But it doesn't detect if a mail address is present or not when it's doing internal relay. And it will just route the mail to the local server. If we want to use the directory blocking edge blocking feature, we need to change this. And for this to work, you will also need to have set up a DIRSync with your on-prem environment and Office 365. I'll not go into the DIRSync part today. I think a lot of other sessions might have covered something similar, but the DIRSync is definitely needed for this to work. And you change your domain to authoritative, and it also tells you that it will enable the directory you have for this directory edge blocking feature. And should be updated. So now we are running authoritative using the directory edge blocking features of EUP. So now we have set up the EUP so we can communicate, we can receive, and we can send mail for this. It's still not set up so that our on-prem environment is actually able to use this. For our on-prem environment to be able to use Exchange Online Protection, we need to update our send connector in the on-prem environment to use EUP as a smart host. I'll just go back and get that setting. And to get that information, you go back in the main portal of Office 365 where you have the domain settings. And for me, the litware.dk, I can go over here and say manage DNS. In here, I have a lot of information about that DNS that needs to be set up and how it needs to point to EUP, also in case I want to use it for Exchange Online in the future. But for me to use EUP as a smart host for my on-prem Exchange environment, I need to put in this address as a smart host on my on-prem send connector. When I've updated my send connector on-prem for this, all mail going out of my on-prem environment will go to the EUP. So if we go back to the EUP spam settings, you'll find that under the protection tab in here. You have different areas up here. We can start off with the quarantine. This is the quarantine where you'll see your company's mail that has been quarantined, and you as the admin can go in and release any of these mails. If we want to tweak some of the settings that we have different rules. Looks a lot like the ones you have in Exchange 2013. If we want to start off with the end user report on what has actually been caught and quarantined for the individual end user, you go in to the content filter settings, and down here you will have the configure end user spam notification. If I enable this, the users will in the future get a report if mail destined for them has been caught in the quarantine. And I can set this up so they'll receive this report every 1 till 15 days. In this case, I'll set it up so the next day they'll receive a report of what have been caught in the spam notification. And if you have the needs for it, you can set up certain languages for it as well. So if we look at what spam settings we have in the system, I opened up the default content filter we have, and the first step we have in here is what are the settings of the spam and the bulk mails that are actually received by EUP. The default setting is that you move the mails to the junk mail folder of the users. So you need to be aware of this when it's set up, because if this is the setting, the users are not getting access to the quarantine, because for this setting to work, you need to add 2 transport rules on your on-prem system. But this setting could be something that makes sense for you. In that case, update your on-prem system with those transport rules. And there's a lot of, in the EUP documentation, it will be stated what these transport rules need to include. But if we want to use this as a cloud service, maybe we just want to quarantine the message so it stays in the EUP. You need to change this then. And then we can set on for how long do we actually want to retain the spam we have in here. And after that, the spam will automatically be deleted from the quarantine area. I will not deep dive further into all these features because we can really spend a lot of time going into all these. I have a lot of other, hopefully interesting parts I want to show you before the session ends. But what I'll recommend is start off with these things. Start off as mostly with the default settings and then tweak the system so it fits your organization. Another thing we have is the reporting part. It's something that Microsoft has been enhancing quite a bit on, especially for the past year. We have some reporting in the portal that we were in just before, and I'll dig in and show you a bit of it later. But we also have some reporting where we can export a lot of the information and actually work with it in an Excel worksheet. So let's have a brief look at that. In the portal, it's more like the basic information that you might need when managing mail systems, or if you want to report back to management, maybe what has been identified, what mail that goes through the system. If we'll find that in the report tab over here, and as you can see, you have different options to detect top senders, malware, how the malware detection is, and so on. All that information is also accumulated in the export we do in the Excel sheet, and the Excel sheet is way better at presenting this, and also you then get the information so you can actually work with it afterwards if you have those requirements. So I'll focus on the Excel sheet. The Excel sheet is a download only from Microsoft, and you will find it on the Microsoft download portal. What we do now is we want to do a query, and you have to enter the admin tenant information for your EUP tenant. So in my case, I want to use a bit more live data than I had on the demo tenant I was working on before. So I'm borrowing one of my customers' EUP tenant here, so we have a bit more interesting information to look at. When you start to extract this information from the EUP portal, you put in how many days of information you actually want to work with. This is the default settings. I think 14 days is probably enough, just to give you an idea of how this works and how it looks. So, as you see, this is definitely presented pretty well. It could be also some reports that's easy to pass on to further management if you have those kind of needs. You can drill down further into a lot of these information if you need to. For instance, if you're mostly interested in the malware or even the spam that's coming in. Who's getting the most spam in the company? How much do we actually get? For now, it's listed all 14 days, but you can just concentrate on maybe 1 day if you want to. You can see at what level things might have been blocked. If you're using any of the data loss prevention, you can see which of the rules actually triggered in any of these cases. Or you can work on traffic in general. So that's good, just to give you an overview of the reporting features available with EUP. And also you can use all the reporting features to help monitor and fine-tune your implementation of EUP as you go on. It's a good way of making sure that if you need any adjustments done, this might help you finding the settings you need to tweak. If we take a look at the best practices when we start to implement these things, there are certain do's and certain don'ts on this. Well, to start off, take some domains that are not primary domains in your organization. If you have certain domains that maybe are just test domains, use them. Otherwise, use some subdomains to do the mail testing on. It's easy to add the other domains later on if you want to go fully live with the system. Besides that, if you run into any issues with the EUP implementation and the communication with your on-prem environment, the Exchange Remote Connectivity Analyzer can help you a long way on this. And also best practice is when you're all done running with EUP as the scan engine for your company, limit the communication for SMTP in your firewall, so you only communicate with the EUP services. Microsoft has a list available of all the IP addresses that is part of the EUP service, and you can limit that in your on-prem environment, so you're only able to communicate with those EUP services. Otherwise, enable the safe list for Microsoft. Microsoft has a reputation safe list, which is not enabled by default on the connection filtering tab in the spam settings. It's recommended to enable this as part of the implementation. Besides that, well, if you're coming from an existing cloud provider of these spam services, maybe you are transitioning some allow or block lists. Make sure you get all that updated in the EUP implementation process. Besides that, the don'ts is don't daisy chain all these services. If you have other cloud antivirus services, don't put EUP in the middle or in the front and stuff like that, because in the end, if you start having problems, it will get really messy to troubleshoot on this if you have multiple engines and multiple services in between all this. If you're an organization that needs to send out a lot of emails to a lot of senders, of course use the EUP service, because as mentioned earlier, Microsoft has these different pools, so they're able to handle your mail correctly when it goes out. So much rather have certain of Microsoft pools get blacklisted instead of your own IP addresses. In this process, make sure you do a lot of testing in the implementation. Telnet, a mail into some of the connectors can be really helpful in getting everything up and running, or even in a troubleshooting process. This is mostly left in the slide as reference, and I know all the slides will probably be available later for you, so you have all that as reference. Know the limitations and the issues that EUP can cause you. Take a look at the service description papers that Microsoft has available. Make sure that the slash reflect what your company has of requirements. Besides that, take a look at the quarantine. How do you actually want to handle quarantine for your users and the mail that goes in? Be aware that the limitation of the mail that goes into the organization with Exchange Online, it's 25 megabyte. With Exchange Online Protection, it's 150 megabyte per mail that goes in. It might fit the most organization, but there are also some organizations out there which 150 megabyte is not enough. So that could be a limitation for you. So investigate those limitations of EUP. I briefly covered this earlier, but as part of this high available service that Office 365 is, Microsoft has data centers all over the world. But based on the MX records that you set when you communicate and set up your domains, mail gets into the region that you're located in. I know it can be an issue for some of us in the European countries that we want mail to be located within EU or the European countries instead of mail getting routed to Asia or the US. So based on those settings that we get when we set up EUP, the mail stays within the European data centers, if that's what you set up when you started setting up the tenant. Microsoft keeps adding on new features and enhancements to all these Office 365 services all the time. I'll not go through each of these steps. It's also meant for reference, but it's something that you need to be aware of, that even though the service might not fit your needs right now, take a look at the roadmaps for these Office 365 services, because Microsoft keeps updating these roadmaps all the time, and all these features are constantly added to the service. I think every 14 days or so, some small change happens to the Office 365 services. In the end of last year, Microsoft put in a lot of new security features on the mail side with checking for DKIM or the DMARC settings and all that. So if you have any of those needs, these features are actually implemented and ready to use within Exchange Online Protection as well. So the basic summary I have for this session is we covered some of the architecture and hopefully give you a good view of how EUP works. and how it routes mail into your organization. And hopefully I gave you a good demo of how you get started on this. Test drive it. Make a trial if you're not already using it. Take it for test drives, see if it fits your organization. And then again, know the limitations of EUP as always. Make sure that the service level agreements fit your organization, or the other limitations that's in the system with the size of mail and size or the number of recipients you can send per mail and stuff like that. So I have a few giveaways for questions. So I hope you have a lot of questions. For this session, I have 10 ebooks sponsored by the co-authors of the Deploying and Managing Exchange Server 2013 High Availability book. And a few of you probably know some of the guys, all Exchange MVPs. Paul Cunningham is running the Exchange Server Pro site, and I'm fortunate enough that they gave me a few copies that I can hand out to you guys. So the way we can do this is, I have 10 copies, so let's see if we have some questions. Any questions for what I went through?
Yes, if you do a quarantine mail in EOP, do the end users get some self-service release functions to release the mail themselves from EOP?
The question goes, when mail is quarantined by EOP, do the end users have a self-service that they can go in and release it themselves? The users have access to the quarantine area in EOP by a URL. I know it had not been documented that well, but I can put it in the slide deck, or at least make sure it's on my blog later on. There is an URL where the user can log in and access their own quarantine area. So yes, there is. Of course, it's a lot easier for the users to access that quarantine area if you're already running DeerSync, because then they can use their credentials that they already know. Other questions?
Do I have any further possibilities to configure the quarantine messages for the user? For example, to say I want to send them out in the morning at 7 o'clock, perhaps via PowerShell, or do you know?
Yeah. The question goes if whether we can customize the report going out to the users certain times in the morning, right?
Twice a day or so?
Yeah, twice a day. No, currently the system sends them out once a day, if that was, or every second day, depending on what we chose. But we cannot ourselves go in and customize the time we want this to go out. Not yet, though. Another question?
Is it necessary to have like the junk email in Outlook activated when you're using EOP?
The question goes if it's necessary to have the junk mail folder within Outlook when we're using EOP. And no, it's not necessary. Of course, it's a default part of our Exchange environment, but we don't need to use it. If we want to use the quarantine area instead, we'll just set that up as I did in there, where I changed it to use the quarantine. And then all mails will end up in the quarantine in EOP for the end user, instead of using the junk mail folder.
About encryption, will it be encrypted on the EOP server or locally?
The question goes about the encryption, if it will be encrypted on the EOP or on-prem, is that right?
Yeah,
Are you talking about the mail or the transmission of the mail?
Yep. Well, if you want to encrypt emails, for instance, to banks, for instance, will it be encrypted locally or from the cloud server?
Okay, if we want to send out mails to government or banks where mails are encrypted with SMIME, right? Yeah. Is it encrypted in EOP or the on-prem? Yeah. Of course, we need the SMIME for the end user to be out there. Need to investigate some of that, but I think EOP can handle it as long as we make sure that the certificate for the end user is out there when we do all the DeerSync stuff.
If
but
depends on which message encryption we are talking about, but I will probably cover that tomorrow.
Okay.
another question?
You say that the mail will in a way stay inside Europe. How sure can it be on that it's really staying there? Is there a legal agreement we are signing on telling that this is not going to happen, that it's going overseas?
The question goes, how sure we can be that the mail stays within Europe, as stated on the different data centers we have. Well, there are some documents. Microsoft has created a complete portal with the Trust Center of Office 365, and all that documentation will be covered there. I don't know, maybe Magnus, maybe you remember all the details about that.
Well, it's if you have a European tenant, it's guaranteed that no mail delivered to that tenant will ever pass through a data center in any other region. So that's a 100% yes.
Another question.
Yeah, you said something about enhanced message tracking in future, but how about message tracking now? Can you track messages to specific users on specific subjects?
The question goes towards message tracking. Do we have the possibility of tracking messages for certain users or topics, subjects within EUP, right? Yeah. Yes, we have those possibilities. It's more or less the same as we know it from our on-prem Exchange environment. And some of it you can access in the portal. And if you like PowerShell, you can do it from PowerShell. Yeah. I think we are close to the end of the session. Those of you who had questions can come down here and we can figure out the information about the ebooks. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the session and got some information that you can use. That's all I had.